We have two parties in the United States, and right now, one of those parties lives in delusion. Conservatives rely on the ability to cast a huge net and to cover a ton of ground and to lie and lie and lie about every single topic they bring up. That's why if you try to ever actually force a conservative to own a particular position, they will pivot away from that and go to some other position where they will lie. Okay. Most of the people that, for instance, I'm debating on these types of debates now don't believe, for instance, that dinosaurs existed. If you look at things like, I believe, the response to the recent disasters was brought up in North Carolina. If you look at the responses from DeSantis, if you look at the responses from Kemp in Georgia, if you look at the response from Collins, everybody is saying we are getting exactly what we need. Joe Biden has called these people already. It is a lie that Donald Trump is pushing. It is a lie that conservatives like John Doyle are pushing, that states aren't getting what they need from Biden. This is just not true. Google.com, search for it. Governor's response, recent disaster, governor's response, hurricane. It's not true. Everything he says is a lie. Now, on the contrary, there has been Donald Trump who has refused aid to states before. There are reported conversations with Kushner saying that Donald Trump wanted to withhold aid from people. Initially in California, when the wildfires were happening under his term, Donald Trump withheld that aid. In a speech a few days ago, Donald Trump talked again about potentially withholding aid from California if they didn't sign on to a bill that would open up more land in the north for agricultural purposes. There is only one president that I know of in recent history that has threatened to withhold national federal aid from states in times of disaster, and that is Donald Trump. Joe Biden has never done this. You will not find statements of him ever doing this. You can look at, I believe, Roy Collins on Twitter right now, just yesterday tweeted a thanks to Biden for calling him and providing everything that they need. This is a lie, like basically every other thing that is said in support of the Republicans. And even ignoring all of the policy, we can even say, fine, maybe they might have a better stance on the border. They don't. Maybe they might have a better stance on the economy. They don't. Maybe they might have a better stance on foreign policy. They definitely don't. Fine, maybe they do, but even if they did, Donald Trump wouldn't be the guy that would be able to get anything done. Donald Trump was not able to get funding for the wall. He wasn't able to build the wall. He ruled like a dictator with executive order. I think he built an itty bitty fence, and then he walked away with his tail between his legs, and he called that a victory. So if you did want a wall, if immigration was something that was scary to you, why would you rely on Donald Trump, who was a massive and total and utter failure in his administration, where both sides of Congress are controlled by his party, to do anything? Why? He wouldn't be the guy for it. He was incapable of doing it. And he was only able to have such good numbers because he was able to rely on COVID to shut down the border with Title 42, and he was able to rely on the fact that a lot of people were sick and didn't feel like making the journey to the United States. And you can tell because if you look at that graph that he lies about, that he shows at events where he says, this is when I left office, he actually left office like about a year later when the immigration numbers are starting to spike up again. So if immigration is your issue, Donald Trump's not the guy to solve it. He can't work with Congress to pass legislation. There was a big bill on the border from Langford that Doyle, for some reason, called Democrat authored. This bill had widespread support among Republicans until Donald Trump came and shut it down. Interviews with Langford confirmed this. You can watch a speech with Ted Cruz where he says this. You can watch McConnell talking about it in the Senate where he confirms this. Nobody is debating this seriously except for the people, the sycophants that try to carry water for Trump outside of his administration. I say outside of his administration because nobody from his last administration is left. How do you have all these people? You look at the people that he surrounded himself with. Where are they at? Donald Trump won in 2016 running on a ticket with Vice President Mike Pence or ex-Vice President Mike Pence. Where is Pence? Why isn't he running anymore? Oh, because when he was in office last, Donald Trump basically watched and tried to get him killed when he was at the Capitol building trying to certify the election. Donald Trump sat by and he watched for 3 hours. You want to talk about a dereliction of duty or an absent commander in chief? He sat by and he watched while the Capitol was rioted, while it was taken over for 3 hours, doing absolutely nothing in the attempts to maybe win the election because the people would be too scared to certify it after he riled his crowd up and he sent them out of the Capitol. When he was in front of that economic forum and they asked him, Donald Trump, what one specific policy would you actually give in order to alleviate childhood poverty? He gave an answer that puts Biden at his worst moments to shame. This was one of the most unbelievable word salads I've ever heard in my entire life. I thought the man was either about to have a stroke or was halfway through one by the time he finished his answer to that question. But again, Republicans have absolutely no standards. They do not live in reality. They think that oil is a self-replenishing thing that comes from the ground because dinosaurs weren't real. Half of them think the Earth is 6,000 years old. We had all these predictions about COVID and the mRNA vaccines and the Chinese-made virus in the lab that didn't come true. Nothing that conservatives have said has come true in terms of all the fear-mongering they did. Nothing. We had 4 years of Biden. Where's my communism? Where was the destruction of the country? It's not here. Donald Trump is easily one of the worst presidents of all time. And his character should reflect on the people that defend him as well. Because remember, the only way to defend Donald Trump is to ignore reality, to be delusional, to pretend that everything under his administration didn't happen, to pretend that things under Biden have happened that haven't happened, and to pretend that somehow in the future he's going to be able to do all of these things that he had a monumental failure of attempting during his 4 years. And remember, it's going to be with an entirely new administration because nobody that works with Trump ever wants to work with him again, because either they see that Trump is corrupt or he calls them a rhino. And so now we have a new Trump. We've got a new vice president with Trump, a guy that said he would co-sign onto all of the malicious activity that Trump wants to do, which Pence wasn't willing to go along with. God knows who he'd want to staff the Department of Justice with, or what any of his other cabinet positions would be like. And God help us all. Even if Trump loses the election, honestly, even if he loses the election by a landslide, the fact that there are so many tens of millions of Americans that have been lied to and tricked and deceived by the figures that were supposed to be at the left. Remember when we were supposed to have a George Soros controlling all of our communications, and instead we got an Elon Musk who is full-throatedly, avowedly, pro-Trump and posting AI misinformation about Kamala Harris, on a social media platform. Remember when the Hunter Biden laptop suppression was like the worst thing that's ever happened in the world? And then we get a J.D. Vance leak, and all of a sudden, now Republicans believe in foreign interference? Now people leaking stuff about actual politicians. Believe it or not, Hunter Biden never ran for anything. I don't know if people remember that or not. Now it's a huge problem. Censoring stories was supposed to be the worst thing. We care about doxing. We care about all these things now. It's crazy how Republicans discover morality and standards whenever they have to levy any type of criticism to the left. I just wish that at some point they would live up to a single standard or apply anything consistently across the board.
Destiny seems to be somebody who has faith in the establishment and the system, generally speaking, to do its job. And Donald Trump's political project is exactly the opposite of that. Donald Trump's political project was to go in and drain the swamp. And as anybody who's a Trump supporter knows, and maybe even laments, that did not exactly happen in his first administration. And it's because Donald Trump was the first president under the Republican ticket who was not awarded a mechanically functioning administration. Donald Trump, even George Bush, who I don't think anyone here maybe is a fan of the way that his administration functioned, but that administration functioned as it should have, in the sense that George Bush was able to delegate and get things done. Donald Trump was not able to do this because there were so many people who understood that he was simply an irritant to an otherwise functioning, well-oiled machine, which is the Washington establishment. They didn't necessarily want to hitch their cart to that and taint a resume. Or you had Reince Priebus, the former head of the RNC. He had a Rolodex of names ready to go to fill these staffing positions. So it's not at all surprising to me that Trump was not able to execute the way that other presidents, including Republican presidents, were able to execute, because everything that Trump sought to do was a disruption of orthodoxies which have existed for 60 years and would like to exist after Donald Trump. And I think that a lot of those personnel issues have been resolved since. I think he understands some of the problems there. But I also think it's sort of nonsensical to conflate, sort of Republican delusion with Democrat delusion. Because when you have Republican delusion, that's like your aunt or uncle at dinner who says something like, I don't know, what if elites are like satanic and do crazy rituals? And it's like, yeah, that's crazy. Democrat delusion is like what these people run on. They run on the issue of, hey, what if we put an axe wound in between a child's legs? Wouldn't that be neat? Hey, what if we couldn't actually define like what a woman is? Things like that. Again, very low-hanging fruit, but simultaneously, I think very important to understand exactly which party is the one advertising and establishing power based on delusion. And so I didn't really hear much that was addressing the points I laid out directly in terms of why Trump did X. It was successful. Biden undid X, and now we are experiencing bad results because of that. And so in terms of Trump's staffing issues, again, you have an incentive there to not want to hitch your cart to that, whereas Kamala Harris had the highest overturning rate for her White House staff in history. It was like 92%. 92% of people who were working for her went away. They said, no, thank you, no more. What kind of leader is it where people who are the closest to her, working for her, in proximity to her, with no other incentive, no other obvious lily pad? I mean, you're working for Kamala Harris. That's maybe the future president. That's the vice president. They still left those jobs because working for her was such a nightmare. So the idea that she could somehow command and be a better executive than Donald Trump is just complete nonsense. Moreover, we haven't even heard that case. All we've heard is that Donald Trump is bad because Republicans are delusional or things like that. The tariff policy, I don't understand why we're against tariffs. Tariffs are like as American as apple pie. Every man who's on Mount Rushmore was a protectionist. 95% of all imports during the height of America's economic growth in the 19th and 20th century were tariffed. Biden even kept the tariffs that Trump implemented, so if they were so bad with the Chinese imports, I mean, you would think that he would have repealed those, but of course he didn't. He held on to them. So I think that, the president is the executive. He doesn't have to necessarily pass bipartisan legislation to be an effective president. He is the executive, the chief executive. Sam Francis once said that there are two parties in D.C. You have an evil party and a party. And occasionally, those two parties get together and do something evil and we call that bipartisanship. I think that's actually true. I don't think bipartisan legislation is an accurate measure for what makes a good leader. Congress has, a 2% approval rating on its best day, something like that? We think working with these people, these swamp rats, is actually indicative of what makes a good leader. A good leader is someone who can get in there and just pass his legislation through. We'll figure out the legality. I shouldn't say it. Well, pass his legislation and, it gets held up in the courts, as it often did with Trump, for example, when he was trying to work through the executive branch and get these different things done. Again, he passed the tax cut. Why? Because even though we maybe agree with tax cuts, ultimately the people who are in charge don't really have a problem with tax cuts. So you have deficit spending, like he said, when the government's taking in less revenue. I don't know what that deficit was precisely, but I bet that it was bigger than the amount that the wall would have cost. Why can't we have a wall? Why can't we have mass deportation? Because immigration is what benefits the ruling class, because we have more people coming in from other countries. They are reliant upon the establishment for money, opportunities, etc., which are then taken away from American citizens, as we've seen with the job growth, as we see with money that's going for relief, all sorts of different things. The Haitians, I don't know why, I was driving through Ohio to get here. I never thought I'd see a Haitian in Ohio. Nothing against Haitians, it's just, peas, apples and oranges, I guess. I don't know. But that should not be happening. We should not be prioritizing the interests of other people from all over the world like we have been during this administration. And Donald Trump dared to say that we can actually put America first. And that is why they have done everything in their power, be it lawsuits to assassination attempts, which my opponent this evening makes jokes about and thinks they're actually warranted, to stop this man, because he upsets those orthodoxies in a way that no one else dared to.
Thank you very much for that 5-minute rebuttal. We'll switch back to Stephen for his 5-minute rebuttal. Stephen, the floor is yours.
Okay, tell me when I'm getting on time, okay? Because I don't have a timer in front of me, okay?
Will do.
Okay, all right, or give me a 30-second notice, okay. Okay, well, Donald Trump talks about draining the swamp. I'm sorry, Donald Trump is the swamp. The most effective swamp that Donald Trump drained were his own cabinet members. When every single person around a guy, whether be it his personal people like Cohen, be it his own cabinet members like Rex Tillerson, people like Mike Pence, be it his own family members or his wife like Melania, who doesn't want to even be seen with him, whether it's other people in office who are begging him to call off the rioters on January 6th, like when him and McCarthy got into a fight on the phone. Every single person that has worked with Trump says that he is trash, and he is trash. How can you scream about having Jabba the Hutt draining the swamp when he is the swamp? Everywhere he goes is a swamp. If Donald Trump hadn't done The Apprentice, he would be a brokey crackhead wandering the streets of the Bronx or Manhattan trying to get a hit. He is a loser in every single part of his life, and the party backing him right now are losers. And I don't mean that in the abstract sense of let's have another 5-hour conversation about trans issues, but I mean that in the sense that his personal business adventures have been an epic failure. He's filed bankruptcy almost over half a dozen times, I believe. People from his prior administration have abandoned him. His own family is abandoning him. He is a convicted felon for a good reason too. He's facing more felony charges. All of the lawyers that were working with him before have been either criminally indicted, criminally convicted, or in the case of people like Powell or Giuliani, disbarred, meaning they can't even practice law again, or Eastman as well. So the idea that we need to drain the swamp, Trump is the swamp, and he surrounds himself with the swamp. I've never seen people so gleefully line up to celebrate when a guy says, I fired the bad people, ignoring the fact that he hired the bad people too. You can't complain and cry about your own administration when it's your administration. And if you want to, that's fine. You could do that, but it just goes to further prove my point. Donald Trump is not the guy for the job. Even if you hate Kamala Harris, even if you think that Donald Trump's policies are good, he's clearly an ineffective leader. And I'm not willing to sit by for another 4 years while this guy takes another run at the office to see if maybe he can figure out how the to do his job this time, because he clearly was incapable of doing it last time. The Republicans, for the first time in the history of the United States Congress, weren't even able to keep their majority speaker seat because there was so much infighting in the party. It's absolutely insane that we would look at a party like this and think they're capable of governing. That you have a president that is trying to aggressively witch hunt into the ground all these people. You want to bring up concrete facts. Again, look at Roy Collins' response in North Carolina today compared to under Trump's administration when they put in a request for some $800 million, and they got got like 8. They got 1% of the requested aid. You could Google this. North Carolina, 2017, requested financial aid, requested federal aid. You could find this. This is all real. They're all facts. There's no way to hide from them. You know what else is facts? You want to talk about draining the swamp? Why do you have pardon lists that people like Giuliani and Eastman are referring to when they're working for Donald Trump? Why are these people going into office assuming they're going to be breaking crimes, asking to be put on pardon list afterwards? Why is Donald Trump pardoning people like Manafort, who's proven to work in Ukraine, the thing, and taking money without declaring it, the things that the Republicans so desperately have been trying to accuse Hunter Biden of doing for years? Why is Donald Trump pardoning people like Blackwater contractors who were responsible for massacres in the country of Iraq? I thought we didn't like foreign intervention. I thought we didn't like this type of foreign policy. I guess unless Donald Trump is saying things like we're going to kill the terrorist families or we're going to take all of the Syrian oil fields. I wish the Republican delusion was just about dinosaurs or oil, but unfortunately, the Republican delusion runs far deeper and is far sicker. You heard Doyle laugh and joke and say, well, you got to pass legislation and then figure out the legality afterwards. He's joking, but that's not a joke. That was the plan on January 6th. That's why Eastman said, we're going to try this particular thing, but if it gets tested to the courts, we'll probably lose 2-7. No, we'll probably lose 0-9. We'll probably lose every single Supreme Court justice. But you know what? I bet it won't even make it to court because it's a major political question. We're not even going to touch it. And that was the whole plan to overthrow the election. 80% of Republicans still to this day don't even believe that the results of the last election were real. So unfortunately, the delusion goes much further. You want to talk about what is a woman? Well, right now, according to a conservative, a woman could be a fugitive of her state if she is crossing state lines because she might be going after an abortion. A woman might be somebody who you can track at the border if she wants to drive into another state that has legalized access to certain types of contraceptions or certain types of abortion procedures because you don't want her to be able to have an abortion.
30 seconds.
I mean, the idea that Republican delusion, doesn't run as deep as it does and isn't deeply rotting, not only in a character and moral sense, but also just in a procedural sense, is laughable. Again, you want to talk about Donald Trump, and the fact that tariffs are great. I don't know where that 95% number came from, but Donald Trump's big crowning achievements were tax cuts, which was deficit spending, and renegotiating the NAFTA agreement into the U.S. Mexico-Canada Free Trade Agreement, now which he wants to completely destroy with tariffs. So even the little bit that he did accomplish was either just deficit spending like they accuse Democrats of doing, or something that he wants to blow up as soon as he gets into office anyway.
All right, this question is for John. I listened to your content for the first time while I was driving over here, and I had a bunch of questions listening to it, but then you said something earlier on in the debate. Could you repeat the number you said of how much of Joe Biden and Kamala's cabinet has stepped down so far?
Kamala Harris had a turnover rate for her staff that was 92%, I believe.
92%. Now, that was for Kamala or the Biden administration?
The one running for president.
So the Biden administration?
No, for Kamala Harris specifically, because we're talking about whether she has leadership capabilities. Her staff, her vice presidential staff, had a 92% turnover rate.
Okay. And when you compare that to a 98% turnover rate for Donald Trump, including 13 members of a cabinet, what do you have to say about that?
Again, it's a completely different assignment. Donald Trump is going
okay. Wait. Hold on. Yeah. You can't just say, it's different.
I do want to give him a chance to answer the question.
It absolutely is. What a Democrat administration is looking to do is different from what a nationalist administration is looking to do. If you're looking to hire from the swamp to fill a nationalist administration, it's going to be a lot more difficult to do that. You're going to be working with neocons, career politicians who are completely misaligned with that agenda, and they're not going to want to have their reputation stained by working for what is viewed to be an irritant by the Republican establishment. If you're Kamala Harris, you're the establishment. You have the blessing of the establishment. The DNC staged literally a coup to put you in as opposed to Joe Biden. Everything she wants to do is more or less an extension of the same political orthodoxies we've had in this country for 60 years. So to me, looking at the situation, I don't understand why anybody would want to not get to say, I worked for Vice President Harris, other than she's simply a completely unlikable person, which makes sense too because you hear leaks about her breaking down. She's always drunk. She has to LARP these dinners prior to meeting with diplomats because she's a wreck. She's always on Adderall, and she just seems to be a complete mess. And so, I don't view it the same way. I would challenge you to not view it as simply, Democrats this, but Republicans this. I think there's more at play going on. I think there's another axiom for how we have to view our political establishment, which is simply the establishment versus the patriots, versus nationalists, people who want to put America first, versus people who want to basically manage the decline of our country until everybody else in the world gets to pick at the bones of our civilization.
And then just real quick, the establishment
Yes.
is not the New York City billionaire, right?
Sorry?
So the New York City billionaire isn't part of the establishment?
I don't think the establishment's necessarily
yeah, that's what I thought.
geographic, It doesn't have to be. It's, what do they call it? The cathedral, right? So.
Are we talking about Kamala Harris' staff turnover? What staff are we talking about here?
Kamala's White House staff had a 92% turnover rate.
Why would we compare Kamala Harris's staff of the Office of the Vice Presidency to somebody's cabinet?
Because she's never been the president, and so if we are trying to find a metric by which to predict her leadership capabilities, the people who are working with her every day, I think, is a worthwhile metric to explore.
Do you even know the responsibilities that the Office of the Vice Presidency has? Why would we compare the people that are working as staffers as part of that small office, as part of the executive branch, to the cabinet, the top level people for your offices and departments?
If she can't bring people on to like stay with her and like write policy and little debate quips or whatever, I don't think that she would be able to keep people on in a cabinet, let alone anybody of quality who would actually do things that benefit us as opposed to what they have done, which is make us poorer, less safe, and more of a playground for the rest of the world, which is like literally what has happened and which you have not addressed.
So if Donald Trump can't maintain his personal relationships with lawyers or his staff, and he's losing all of his businesses, and he wasn't able to maintain his cabinet, what faith do we have that Donald Trump can hold on to cabinet members of the future?
Give you a chance to respond, John, and then we got to go to the next question.
Because I am aware of what is happening mechanically with Trump's next administration, and that inspires confidence.
It's a non-answer. It doesn't mean anything.
We'll go to the next question.
I appreciate that, Destiny.
All right, bye.
Remember to hit that like and subscribe, and don't forget the notification bell so that my videos show up right in your feed.